of videos that give you a practical guide on how to configure ADFS 3 on Windows Server 2012 R2 with Citrix Netscaler and Office 365 for single sign-on. This video is going to cover an overview of the topology I'm using and the certificate requirements and actually installing the first ADFS server. My name is Ryan Betts, I'm a cloud solutions architect and I run a blog at blog.ryanbetts.co.uk. The reason I've put together these videos is I'm quite active at blogging on ADFS. One article in particular comments a lot on configuring ADFS with Citrix Netscaler, and it's proved pretty popular, so I thought I would take the time to record videos as a very practical guide to help people understand how to configure Netscaler to work with ADFS. Okay, so a little bit about me. The most important ones are really the technology focused ones. I've implemented ADFS 6 times. I'm currently in my 7th deployment for a global organisation. They are moving all services to Azure and Office 365. I've got certifications from Microsoft, Cisco, Citrix, VMware, Google, HP, Aruba. You name it. Microsoft wise, I've got MCSE and a number of tracks, MCSD and Azure, MCITP and all the other sort of legacy ones. I've been in IT for about 8 years. For the past 3 years I've been consulting. Presently I live in the Cayman Islands and I'm employed by a company called MCS. My specialisms, certainly for the last couple of years, has been public cloud, so Microsoft Azure, 365, AD, ADFS, you name it, all the sort of Microsoft stack, again, that sort of goes on the back of that. As I said previously, I do operate a blog, so check it out. I'm pretty active in blogging about ADFS as it's something I do fairly regularly. So yeah, like the page if you find any of the information useful. So, as I said before, this isn't going to be an educational course in the sense that I'm going to explain what ADFS does and how it works. This is very much like the practical Swiss Army knife guide on how to deploy ADFS. There's plenty of courses and documentation on how ADFS works, how it works with SAML, how it integrates with applications and all that good stuff. This really is the practical guide, how to, what buttons to click, what has to be in place for this to work. So if you see the topology diagram that I've got on the screen at the moment, this is the lab that I've set up to do these videos. So you'll see on the left hand side I have a LAN network, a 172.16.10 network, which has got my domain controller, my 2 ADFS servers, and that's pretty much all. I have a firewall that separates a DMZ, which has got the web application proxies. The WAP proxies are obviously used to break the direct connection from the internet to ADFS, because ADFS is directly integrated with Active Directory. You don't want to punch a firewall rule straight through to your LAN, if you like. So the web application proxies are of course optional. You don't have to deploy them. You can in fact have ADFS directly on the internet, but it's generally considered best practice to have them reverse proxying out the service. So yeah, I've got a firewall in the middle. I'm not going to cover the firewall configuration. The only traffic that has to basically be allowed to flow both ways between ADFS and the WAP servers across that firewall is TCP 443, so HTTPS basically. You'll notice I've also got a Netscaler VPX in the picture. So, as part of this series of videos, the integration of Netscaler is probably why a lot of people are watching it. So, this is just conceptually where it sits. It's a virtual appliance. It's got an interface on both networks. I will go through the configuration of the different addresses and the different interfaces specifically to Netscaler in one of the later videos. But yeah, that's where it sits. There's an interface on each side. And if you can imagine, in front of the WAP server and in front of the ADFS server, there'll be a Netscaler V server that acts as the VIP between each pair of the WAP servers and the ADFS servers. But again, I'll explain this further when we come to the actual nitty gritty of configuring Netscaler, because that's a topic in itself. So as you'll see, I've also got an exterior firewall, a stateful firewall that allows access out to the internet. I will cover, I should say, in the later videos, how to create the NAT rule from that firewall to forward the traffic to the web application proxy pair. As I said before, that won't actually be one of the web application proxies. That will be a vServer that sits on the Netscaler. The traffic from the internet will hit the vServer on the Netscaler, and then the Netscaler vServer will bounce the traffic between the web application proxies. But again, when we come to that, we'll talk about, you know, the authentication and the protocols used on the Netscaler and all that sort of good stuff. So conceptually, this is how it's set out. It's all done on a lab. I'm doing it all on a MacBook Pro. So it's running a lot of infrastructure virtualized. So it is a little bit sluggish, some of the videos, but bear with me. And yeah, it should be good, and hopefully you get some use out of this. So as I said, I'm not going to cover the theoretical aspects of ADFS, and there's plenty of documents on TechNet and things like that that you can read to scale up on that. So I'm just going to dive straight in to the actual button clicking on how to deploy ADFS. So at present, I've got two ADFS VMs spun up. They've got nothing installed on them. They're just vanilla VMs. They're joined to my domain. This is the domain controller that I've got up here. The first thing we have to do preparation wise is get the certificates in place before we can even run the ADFS setup wizard. Where I see generally people going wrong with server certificates, and specifically to ADFS, is the confusion around creating the CSR. So generally speaking, what I do when I'm creating a new publicly trusted certificate, that, by the way, that is required for ADFS. It has to be publicly trusted. So a GoDaddy or a Komodo or a Symantec or whatever is recommended. Personally, I've had all sorts of problems with wildcard certificates, so I would suggest to stay well away from wildcards for ADFS, although I believe it is supported. So generally, first of all, you have to generate a certificate. So what I do is I normally install IIS on a server or use a server that's already got IIS on it. When you come into IIS, you go into server certificates, you create a new certificate request, you fill in these properties, it outputs a CSR, you give the CSR to GoDaddy or VeriSign or whoever, they generate your certificate after doing some background checks in your company, and then you complete the certificate signing request. The most important field on this certificate is the common name. So the common name will also become your ADFS service name, which clients will look up from the internet and from inside the domain when they're trying to authenticate via ADFS. So for example, I generally use sso.domain .com or whatever. So it's quite important that you think this out, because although it is possible to change it further down the line, it's a real pain. Fill in your common name, fill in the rest of the properties that are relevant for your company. Go through the process, get your certificate, and when you have your certificate, all you basically have to do is complete the certificate signing request and run through this wizard so that it completes it and you have a digital certificate. The bit that I see people fall down on is they don't always realise that you have to complete the certificate signing request on the same machine as you created the CSR. The reason for that is if you don't do that, you do not get the private key and the public key paired up together on the same machine. Therefore, it's not a valid certificate. So, rule of thumb is if you generate the certificate request on a box or a VM, complete the request on the same VM. And then when that's done, you should be able to open up the certificate MMC console from the server that you've done that, expand certificates and see your SSL cert. You'll notice that there's a little key beside the cert, and if I double click on that, you will see that we have the private key for this certificate, which means it's going to be valid and it's going to be usable. You will see that I've got an issued certificate by Komodo. This is an interesting one if you're doing a lab. Komodo give you a free 90-day SSL certificate, so that's great for testing. You don't have to spend any money to get a certificate to effectively spin up ADFS in your own environment. So with that being said, this is the certificate installed on a domain controller, which isn't required for ADFS if you like. However, this certificate is required on all of the ADFS components. So if you think back to the diagram in the first stage, we had web application proxy servers and we had the ADFS servers. This certificate is required on all 4 of these servers. So how you export this certificate from the machine that you did the request on, you completed the certificate signing request. The easiest way to do it is double click on the cell, click on details and go copy to file. Go through this wizard, and the most important part in this wizard is to go click yes, export the private key. What we want to do is we want to bundle the private key and the public key into a PFX file so that we can effectively copy that to other servers and install the entire certificate so that it's going to work properly. It's mandatory to set some sort of password, so I just put 123. It's only for testing. We'll click next. We will select a place to dump this out, so I'll just do sysl cert, click next and finish. So that's all good. Export successful. We can come out of this and close down these consoles, and then we're free to copy this certificate to the ADFS component. So when we do it, it's very important that the certificate gets imported into the local machine store and not the current user store. So just ensure when you're installing this onto the ADFS servers, you click local machine. So click next, run through the process, type in the password. This option is an interesting one. Mark the key as exportable. I probably would suggest not selecting that option on the WAP servers because they're in the DMZ and they're effectively in a less secure network. However, I would suggest marking it on the ADFS servers in case you have an ADFS server that dies and you need the certificate for whatever you want to be able to export that private key. So rule of thumb is have that selected for the ADFS servers and have it deselected for the WAP servers. So run through and install that onto each of the ADFS server components, and then you should be good certificate wise. Okay, so that's fine. So now we can move over to the ADFS server and look at actually installing and configuring ADFS. So if we move across to the ADFS server, you will see that I've got the first ADFS server here. It's called labfs1. It's in the domain. It's got an internal IP address, and it's on Windows Server 2012 R2. So quite trivial. The first stage is to install the ADFS role itself. So we'll just skip through the wizard panes. I'm sure everyone's familiar on how to do that. Select ADFS and click next. We don't have to do any customization of the features or anything. Just the basic default install is fine. Just for good measure, I always select restart the destination server if required. So yeah, click install. We'll just let that complete. So that is complete, so we can just click close. Because we've now installed ADFS, we can go ahead and configure the ADFS service itself. So I'm going to click on this option here. One thing that we will check just before we run through this is I'll just open up the certificate console on this server itself just to ensure that the ADFS certificate is there. So as you'll see, it's there, the private key is there, the date range is within date, so it's a valid certificate. So this should be good to install and operate on ADFS. When we skip through this wizard, there'll be a part that we get to. If the certificates aren't configured correctly, you won't be able to continue, because if you don't have the certificates imported correctly, you hit a blocker when you try to configure certain parts of ADFS and it just doesn't let you continue. So anyway, on we go. As this is the first ADFS server in the farm, we're going to select create the first federation server in the farm. Click next. It's passed through my domain admin credentials. That I hope goes without saying that you need to be a domain admin to do this. Click next. This is the part I was meaning that if you've not imported the certificates correctly, you can't proceed past this part. So if your certificate does not have a private key assigned to the certificate, your certificate will not show up in this drop down, which means that you won't be able to continue until you fix that. So if for whatever reason your certificates aren't set up right, backtrack to the start of this video and listen again to how I explained it, and you should hopefully be able to work it out. So from the drop down, I'm just going to select the certificate that I want to use. At this stage, the Federation display name is really just a string that's displayed on the ADFS landing page, so I'm just going to put in labfs. That can be changed at a later stage. Click next. The service account, again in production environments, you probably want to use a group managed service account. From memory, group managed service accounts are only available in domains operating at server 2008 R2 level. And a group managed service account basically allows Active Directory to dynamically manage the password for a service account. So Active Directory will go ahead and change the service account password every 30 days and keep track of it and change the applications that are using and so on. It just relieves some of the bugbear of statically setting passwords for service accounts, and then people delete the accounts and it breaks things and so on. Again, this is only testing, so I'm just going to basically contradict what I've just said, and I'm just going to use my administrator username and password because this is only testing, and click next. Of course, ADFS does have a database requirement. The Windows internal database is, a very, very small footprint database that runs as a service on top of Windows. Windows internal database for ADFS is good for up to about 5 ADFS servers. I believe if you have to scale past 5 servers, you then have to use SQL. But generally speaking, the Windows internal database is generally good for most deployments. So we'll just click next. This is a testing server. I've already had ADFS installed on this server, but I removed it so that I could redo it to record this video. So, if it's a clean config you're doing, you won't get this message, but I'm just going to go overwrite existing configuration data and click next, and configure. It shouldn't take too long, and then when that finishes, we'll be able to open the ADFS console and actually see where some of the properties sit and where we can configure some stuff. So that's finished. I'm just going to click close. The ADFS, it's been configured now. If we go down to start and then go down, we should be able to see ADFS management. So this is where, besides PowerShell, this is where all your GUI all your GUI configuration is done. As this is the first video and it covers certificates, I want to direct your attention to service and then certificates. Under here you will see 3 certificates. The top one being service communications. That is the publicly trusted certificate that we imported at the start. That is required. If you federate to Office 365, this certificate has to be in date. It has to be valid. If you have ADFS in place and your certificate expires, and you maybe forgot that it was going to expire, and your federation effectively breaks, the process to replace the service communication certificate is really straightforward. All you do is import your new certificate, much like we did in the last, at the start of this video, and then you come in here and then you come across the set service communication certificates. And if you imported a new certificate, it would appear on this list. You select it, you click OK, and you restart the ADFS service, and that's all good. That certificate has to be copied onto all the components again. So if you replace the certificate on this box, you only have to do the configuration on the primary ADFS server. But what you have to do is you have to manually copy the new certificate to the other ADFS servers and the WAP servers. So yeah, pretty straightforward stuff. It's quite logical if you think it through. You've also got token decrypting and token signing. These are self-signed that are generated by the machine. And these are exchanged. If you have the WAP servers, the web application proxies, these certificates are dynamically exchanged with the web application proxy, I think every 30 days from memory. But you don't have to worry about changing these or the validity of these. These are all self-signed, and they're managed by the ADFS service. Okay, so that's the first video, the overview, the certificate installation, and the topology that we're going to use. So currently the video plan is to have about 6 videos that go through all the different components. So I hope it's been useful, and if it has, please like the video. Thanks.